Don't bring me down. Don't bring me down.
Hey guys, Debo here, finishing the conclusion of all the skill guides that I've been going through. We're going to be working on the Terror and the Decay and the Voodoo guide before. If you are starting on this video and this is the first video you saw in the series, you need to start on the Primate Skill guide, followed by the Secondary and the Defensive. And like I said, we're closing out today with these three last skill trees and such. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. First skill up for the Terror is Soul Harvest. I would have to say this is probably going to be your number 2 spell in every single Witch Doctor build outside of Spirit Walk. So if you had to ask me, old Debo, what skills does every like Witch Doctor pretty much have to take? And I would say Spirit Walk and Soul Harvest. Maybe not Soul Harvest in PvP, but definitely in PvE you want to have your Soul Harvest on your keys. Because, like I said, it's you feed on the life force of the 5 enemies. So basically, you have to land it on 5 enemies. You land it on 3. You land it on 2 or 1. You only get a certain amount of the bonus. 16 yards. Gains 130 intelligence for each affected enemy. The effect lasts for 30 seconds. Really good skill. So basically, collectively, you'll end up actually getting, at level 60, everything maxed out. You land it on 5 targets, you're going to get about, I think, 650 intelligence. With, once you start building up a certain amount of intelligence and base damage, and you get towards some late game, like, gear setups, and you start to accumulate pretty decent gear, it's actually a substantial amount of DPS bonus, so it's definitely something you definitely want to take. But as to the skill runes, there's a lot of different diversity in what people like to take. Swallow Your Soul is a pretty decent one. It gains 39 mana for each enemy harvested. So, it's really not too bad, a little bit under 200 mana. But, you know what? A lot of people kind of use this as their first rune only when they're really leveling from 1 to 60. Outside of that, there are a little bit of better options. Such as Siphon, gain 2,000 life for every enemy harvested. This is actually a very, very good way to keep yourself alive, just in general, at low level or even at high level play, in terms of when you're doing Inferno and such, because if you landed on 5 enemies, that's 10k health, almost as good as a potion, and it definitely helps a lot with keeping yourself alive. I used to use it a lot back in the day before they buffed the Witch Doctor significantly, back when Inferno actually used to kill you pretty horribly, and Elites used to 1 to 2 shot you. Still to this day, very good skill to have. Like I said, it's just good to get your HP back. Sustaining if you're finding that you're having or getting into situations where you just need some way just to keep your life up, or if you're having a problem with dealing with reflect mobs, things like that. This is something that you might want to incorporate into your skill rune selection with this skill to help you get back a lot of life. Languish, I'm going to be honest. No one's going to really use Languish. I mean, it slows the movement speed of the harvest enemies by 80% for 3 seconds. Unfortunately, I'm going to be honest, it's a really bad skill rune. If it was permanently, well, no, I guess if it was permanently, it'd be a little bit too strong. I would say maybe it would need to be stun, or maybe Languish, you slow them and apply a poison dot on them, or I don't know. It's just, overall, it's just not a good skill for PvP or PvE, so never take this skill whatsoever. Soul to Waste, increased duration of Soul Harvest affected by up to 60 seconds. Really, really good skill to have. And you're going to actually have to say between Soul to Waste and Vengeful Spirit, which we'll go over the next one, that's going to be pretty much the main one you actually want to go for. And people say, well, Debo, why do I want to get Soul to Waste? All it does is just increase the duration by 60 seconds. Well, yes. But the big thing about Soul to Waste is if you're running Feast, Soul Feast, or let me see, Gruesome Feast, let me just read you off Gruesome Feast here. Whenever you're healed by a health globe, you gain 10% of your maximum mana and 10% intelligence for 10 seconds. The intelligence stacks up to 5 times. And you might be like, okay, well, Debo, what's the whole point of having it increased by another additional 30 seconds? Well, picture, if you will, if you only have 30 seconds of having 5 stacks of Soul Harvest on your Witch Doctor, and let's say you pick up a couple of orbs or a couple of globes, right? And you only have 30-second window in which you're going to keep the Soul Harvest buff up. So you may not, sometimes you might only have 2 stacks, 3 stacks, 4 stacks, and every 30 seconds you have to recasting it. You may not have a mob of 5 monsters, and you may only have 2 stacks, and you pick up those the Gruesome Feast orbs, and you're not really maximizing your potential damage output. But, I mean, if you go ahead and land the Soul Harvest with Soul to Waste, and you get 5 stacks, not only are you allotted a whole entire minute, which is a very long time, to keep those 5 stacks, you can pretty much guarantee that when you're picking up those Gruesome Feast orbs, that they're not only giving you back your HP and mana, but they're also giving you the 10% additional bonus to your intelligence based off what your current intelligence is. So if you actually have Soul Harvest, you have your maximum 5 stacks at 650 mana. When you pick up those Gruesome Feast orbs, they're going to be scaling 10% intelligence off the your base int plus your Soul Harvest int. And that's exactly what we're going to do to maximize your DPS. So that's why I opt to get it. And plus you're not always constantly casting and whatnot. It makes things a lot easier. But basically, if you're running Gruesome Feast, Soul Oasis is the way to go. It maximizes your DPS so you can ensure that every time you get those 5 stacks of the Gruesome Feast buff, you will always, or at least you should have the 5 stacks of your Soul Harvest up on your Witch Doctor always. Last one, Vengeful Spirit, another very good skill. 203% weapon damage as physical. This is really good because it just does a lot of damage, and especially depending on what type of build you run. A lot of Witch Doctors have a lot of high-end DPS builds, or I even seen a couple of the Witch Doctors that are running zombie bears with Engraven Justice actually like to use this. You know, you just go in a mob, you cast Vengeful Spirit, you get your buff, and you do damage to them. I mean, you get all the positives. You're getting your buff, you're doing damage to the targets. So pretty much you're going to see a lot of Witch Doctors running Vengeful Spirit, especially if they have Dive DPS. Soul Waste if they have Gruesome Feast. You're not going to see that many running Languish, Siphon in rare occasions, and Swallowing your soul pretty much only when you're leveling. So like I said, just for the Soul Harvest, you probably want to stick to Soul Waste and Vengeful Spirit, and then leave the Swallow your soul and Siphon to when you're leveling, and totally leave Languish alone, because it is pretty much useless. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to our next skill, Sacrifice. Sacrifice, banish your zombie dogs and cause them to explode, each dealing 275% weapon damage as physical to all enemies within 12 yards. Okay. So we'll talk about it in terms of if you're just a skill by itself, not considering if you're going for like a 0 zombie dog cooldown build in which you can spam zombie dogs infinitely. We'll just talk about the skill just in general. It's a fairly good skill. There's a lot of different combos and tricks you can do. I'll keep it real simple. As long as you understand that you want to either have a 0 zombie dog cooldown or have an ability where or have a passive or set it up so that you're constantly generating zombie dogs so you can keep continually sacrificing. That's what you really want to do. But in general, it does do a lot of damage for the zombie dogs, especially if you're going for a high-end DPS build. The only thing it does matter on is the positioning of the dogs. And depending on where you summon and detonate the dogs can make the difference between doing a lot of damage and next to no damage. If you really are trying to go into a sacrifice type build, zombie dog handler is really good. Increases the HP of your zombie dogs and your gargantuan, but most importantly, it gives you the extra zombie dog, which allows you to do more DPS. So yeah, 275% of your weapon damage as physical enemies within 12 yards. All right, so Black to Blood. The first one, it erupts from the corpse of the zombie dogs and slows them by 60% for 8 seconds. You only take it really when you're at low level. This is not what you're going to use at high level or in-game level. It's just pretty much just not worth it. The next one is Next to Kin, and this is actually a pretty good one if you're actually not, you want to run a zombie dog build, but you don't, you're not running the 0 cooldown zombie dog build. And this kind of helps you basically keep generating your zombie dogs back. Each time your zombie dog sacrifice has a 35% chance to resurrect as a new zombie dog. So pretty much if you cast 3 zombie dogs, you have a pretty much guaranteed chance that at least one of them will come back, and then you'll be able to get off an additional detonation. And if you run it with 4 zombie dogs, your chances are even increased even more. There's been some times when I'm spamming the button straight for 8 seconds just blowing up dogs because it keeps triggering over and over again. So if you're running a build that does not involve the 0 zombie dog cooldown effect, then I definitely would recommend Next Kin. It gets your next zombie dog out of your when you start blowing them up, and it just will really make things a lot easier in terms of making sure you always at least have a couple dogs up so you can get off your sacrifices. Pride, regenerating mana for each zombie dog you sacrifice. This could be kind of useful, but not really. Witch Doctors has a lot of other utilities and a lot of other abilities, passives, and actually geared to keep their mana up, so I wouldn't really ever recommend Pride. Unless, I mean, that's personally if you just like the 294 mana for each zombie dog you blow up, which is fairly decent. But like I said again, there are other options that a Witch Doctor can do to basically ensure that he keeps his mana at a safe level, so I would highly not recommend taking Pride. For the Master, This is actually a fairly decent one, but the big thing is the only reason why this isn't so super mega great is because, I mean, it gives you the 6,200 life for each zombie dog you sacrifice, so it's about basically 20,000 HP. The zombie dogs actually have an ability, so when you set them, they have a chance to leave behind health globes. So basically, if you go ahead and you usually a lot of the zombie sacrifice builds do have that, because not only are they going to get the health globes back that can heal you, if they take gruesome feast, they're also going to get the bonuses. So for the master, it really becomes a little bit lackluster. You can basically treat your zombie dogs as potions, but I mean that's why we have potions where we have Haunt. I mean, I'm sorry, that's where we have Jaunt with Spirit Walk Rune, just so we can get out of a situation. So I mean, if you're really taking a lot of damage, I guess you can really take it. But I mean, you're a witch doctor. You have Spirit Walk. You have a lot of different passives that negate a lot of damage. You should never be in a position where you're actually going to have to sacrifice your zombie dogs to get back your life. So we'll just go ahead and stick it with the pride category, where you just really don't want to run this at all. Now, Provoke of the Pack is pretty interesting. Each sacrificed zombie dog increases your damage by 5% for 30 seconds. It's pretty okay. I mean, it's pretty nice when you combo it with other, when you have like a lot of DPS, the 5% actually does make a difference. And if you sacrifice 3 dogs, I mean, that's 15% increased damage, and with gruesome feats and some other things, it can end up being a lot of damage for the extra additional bonus for 30 seconds. So I would just say be cautious and be wary. Like I said, you get a little bit more out of Next of Kin, because Next of Kin, I think, in general, out of all of them, is the best one to take. Your zombie dogs have an additional chance of coming back to life, which means it allows you to basically just keep sacrificing your dogs as many times as you can before eventually your Next of Kin just doesn't trigger enough to bring them back. Provoke the Pack is okay. Increases your DPS pretty well. Like I said, you only really use it if you're going high-end DPS. At low-level DPS, you're really not going to see the difference in that 5%, and you should stick with Next to Kin. But, I mean, it's something to think of if you are actually looking for something a little bit different and you don't necessarily care about your zombie dogs coming back. Like, Provoke the Pack would be better probably for a 0 zombie dog cooldown build, because you're always going to be sacrificing your dogs nonstop, so you're going to pretty much keeping up a free 15 to 20% DPS bonus for 30 seconds all the time, because you're always going to be sacrificing your dogs. But if you're not going a zombie dog cooldown build, then Next to Kin is definitely probably going to be what you basically want to take in terms of skills. So basically, sacrifice, take Next to Kin, or take Provoke of the Pack. Don't pick anything else, because their other ones are just pretty much useless. Alright, last up in the territory, Mass Confusion. Mass Confusion, incite paranoia enemies, confuse them, and causes them to fight for you for 12 seconds. Pretty good in group play. Sucks in PvP. PvE, it's alright. It's not the greatest one. The only drawback of this ability is that it's 60 seconds. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. Reduces the mass effect, reduces the Mass Confusion cooldown by 45 seconds. I'm sorry, reduces it to 45 seconds. If it was actually reduced it by 45, they'd probably make that the best rune of Mass Confusion. So it basically takes it from 60 seconds down to 45. Really not that great. I mean, it has enemies fight for you for 12 seconds, but once you get to a certain amount of DPS, it doesn't really even matter casting Mass Confusion on your foes, because odds are they'll probably be dead very quickly. Devolution actually can combo pretty well, because if you Mass Confuse a mob and then you kill them, you can regenerate a chance for zombie dog. I mean, it's alright, it's semi-decent if you're trying to get more zombie dogs so you can sacrifice. But anything outside of that is really not that good of a skill that you can definitely use. It doesn't really help out too much. Mass Hysteria, the 6 enemies who aren't confused are stunned for 3 seconds. Like I said, PvP is okay, but in PvP, the stun duration does get decreased, and it's really just in general, in PvE and group settings, it's really not that great. Now, Paranoia, very good Mass Confusion skill. If you're going to take Mass Confusion, I would have to highly recommend pretty much Paranoia be your #1 choice, because every other enemies that get caught in the Paranoia take 20% additional damage for 12 seconds, and that's a very long time. Whether it be in PvP or even in PvE, it can make a big difference in Ubers, it can make a big difference in MP10, because not only are you shutting down an enemy with CC through the Paranoia, you're also increasing how much damage you take by 20%, which is really good. Especially like in PvP, if you get hexed by a Witch Doctor and he has his hex rune set to he turns you into a pig and you take 20% extra damage, which is Jinx rune. With the Mass Confusion, taking that a 40% additional damage, it pretty much will kill anybody. So like I said, in PvP, it's a really good skill to have. PvE, it's semi-decent, but overall, it's a pretty strong rune to have for the Mass Confusion. Last one, Mass Hallucination. Met the confusion of giant spirit rampages through me, doing 54% weapon damage per second as physical enemy passes through. It looks cool, but in all honesty, I'm gonna be straightforward. Pretty much all the skill rules for Mass Confusion suck except with the exclusion of Paranoia. And the only reason why we're taking Paranoia because it's very good versus elites and others. Well, mostly because of elites and bosses, but predominantly because of elites, because you'll be able to confuse them, cause them to fight for you, and they're also going to take 20% extra additional damage. So if you're going to be rolling with Mass Confusion, you should definitely use Paranoia. Alright. Now we're in the wonderful Decay tree. This probably has to be one of the biggest trees in determining what type of Witch Doctor you're going to be. Whether you're going to be Bear, whether you're going to be Acid Cloud, or, if you're going to be using Well of Souls as a Witch Doctor. So let's just go ahead and hop right into it. Zombie Charger, Leper Zombie, or let me go with this skill first. Call forth a Reckless Suicidal Zombie that deals 205% weapon damage as poison to all enemies in his path before decomposing. Definitely one of the top tier DPSing skills in the game for the Witch Doctor. It scales off really well off of critical percent chance and critical damage. The more crit percent chance you get, the more crit damage you get, the more this spell is just going to do a ridiculous amount of damage. But you have to make sure you always cast the skill in the right direction, and you got to be on level playing field or level terrain so you can really get the most effectiveness out of your bears. It might take a little bit of a while to get used to it, but once you definitely get used to how you have to cast it, and once you get the gear to do a lot of damage with this specific skill, you'll be mowing down elites very quickly in no time. So the first one, the Leper Zombie. Zombie Charger leaves behind a cloud of noxious vapors, deals 250% weapon damage, is poisoned for 3 seconds. If enemies get caught in it, not that great. On death, if the Zombie Charger kills an enemy, it will reanimate the charger by enemies for 205% weapon damage. Is poison. This effect can hurry up to 2 times. That's pretty decent when you're actually leveling up through the late ranks and stuff like that. But still not the greatest. I mean, they could have done a little bit more with the skill, but I mean, I guess it was okay. I wish the wave would just keep going over and over again until everything on the screen is just dead or maybe in a straight line, but then again, it might make it a little bit too OP. Wave of Zombies. Summons 3 zombie charges that each deal 115% weapon damage as poison. Very lackluster. The zombies are okay, but like I said, you're just kind of using these skills as you go if you want to level with it up until level 60. Explosive Beast, this is where it actually starts to get pretty decent. The zombie charger the zombie charger with the explosive beast actually do pretty well. However, there's only one beast that comes out. It explodes for 9 yards, and it's just not the kind of DPS that's going to be warranted or justified for 140 mana initial cost. Now, the big one, which everybody uses, and I'd say this is one of the most popular skills for Witch Doctor, is Zombie Bear. Because you summon the zombie bears that stampede towards your target. Each bear deals 236 weapon damage as poison to enemies in that area. So it does the poison damage, it does all the damage to that enemy in the area. If they get hit by multiple bears, that each individual bear does their own set amount of damage. And they all run in a straight line, very easy to cast on level terrain. And this is probably going to be the bread and butter of everything that you're going to be using as soon as you have the correct level to start using it. However, if you're actually going to start looking into Zombie Charger, I would recommend a lot of items that help with mana regeneration. Possibly a Zunimasa set 4 piece that also helps you get back mana when you kill things. And also, you definitely don't want to run Pierce the Veil because that's going to increase the mana cost of this build immensely. The biggest thing about bears is you need for bears is a good critical percent chance, good critical damage, and you also just definitely want to have that all resistance for survivability, and most importantly, a way where you can just consistently keep regenerating back that mana. As long as you can keep casting zombie bears, you'll be pretty much good to go, and not that many things will be able to survive your path. Alright. Spirit Barrage. It's an okay skill. Bombard target with Spiritual Blast that do 230% weapon damage is physical. It's really nice to use when you're leveling up. The first one is the Spirit Wailing. Gain 44 mana every time Spirit Barrage hits, which is okay. So basically it just gives you like a little bit of a discount from the 108 mana. Not that great. Wouldn't recommend taking it. Only take it when you're leveling. Well of Souls. This one, I got mixed opinions about it. A lot of people claim to say it's very good, but the problem with Well of Souls is it just doesn't do enough damage for how much mana it consumes, and you're better off using Zombie Bears or Acid Cloud. And PvP is very good because it can seek out the target and do a lot of good amount of damage, hits a lot of targets on screen, and it's just really hard to deal with a Witch Doctor who's spamming that within PvP. But even with the current change to the current effect, because 1.07 just came out for Witch Doctor, they made it so that the additional, like, AoE, like, spirits that shoot out, they actually can target on the target which you're clicking upon. Even with that buff, it's still not the greatest. So I would just recommend just skipping over this one. You can kind of play around with it. Like I said, it works really well in PvP, but if you're actually going into a Well of Souls build with Spirit Barrage, you're better off using Bears or Acid Cloud. You'll get a lot more return out of your value for the spell, because, I mean, with the way the mana cost is set up and how it's just basically done in general, it's going to be really tough for you to get a lot out of that skill. So I would advise you to skip over it unless you're doing PvP. Phantasm is actually really good. I like it. The cool thing about this is that you summon a Spectre that deals 225% weapon damage on the ground. And the nice thing about it, it does 225% weapon damage as physical over 5 seconds to all enemies within 10 yards. Now, the cool thing about this, you can actually have 3 of them out. And if an enemy is actually within the vicinity of all these, they will actually take 250% weapon damage from each individual Phantasm. The only drawback of this is that you have a lot of enemies that happen just to run out of the Phantasm, but if you ever go against Ubers or certain bosses or certain enemies that you typically stay in one place for a good amount of time, it's actually a really good spell to actually use, and it actually does a lot of damage, because if an enemy gets caught in the middle of that with all 3 Spirit Barrages on top of them, he's going to take an immense amount of damage. Like I said, 225% weapon damage times 3, that's 675 weapon damage over 5 seconds, which is a lot of DPS. It works up to 10 yards and hits everything in AoE effect, but like I said, the biggest drawback of it is just getting the enemy to stay within it. Sometimes they'll walk clearly through it, sometimes they'll teleport through it, and sometimes they'll just sit there and take all the damage. But if you're looking for a good alternative, it's really nice because it kind of encourages you not to spend a lot of mana, because after 3 casts, you can't cast anymore. Because basically it only allows you to have 3 of them out at once. Because I'll show you right here. 1, 2, and then 3. And then on the 4th cast, the first one dissipates. So, if you have a fast attack speed like I do, you can cast them out really quick. And you can get them out real quick. And it makes it somewhat pretty easy to maximize your damage and such. I'll just show you guys what happens when I actually don't have my attack speed on. How fast. And this, like I said, is immensely slower. So the attack speed determines how fast you can cast it out, and like I said, it's just something to look into. A lot of people don't use it. It's actually a very good skill to use. So that's why I basically just wanted to show you guys, because I actually used to use Spirit Barrage a lot back before they gave so many tools to the Witch Doctor, per se. Lobotomize is, I'm going to be honest, is pretty garbage. Regain 3% of the damage dealt with Spirit Barrage's life. You really don't need that, because if you already have a carving knife, it's going to have life still in it. And if you have that high kind of DPS already, you're never really going to be using Spirit Barrage in the first place for the most part. Manitou, I really wish they could have done a little bit more with this. I would have liked to seen that weapon damage cut over 10 seconds, but it really just doesn't do a lot of damage to justify taking the skill. So I'll pretty much, out of the Spirit Barrage tree, I would actually get Well of Souls, or I would stick with Phantasm while not worrying about any other skills. Alright, another major skill that a lot of people like to use is called Acid Cloud. The way people usually like to run this is either having Medusa spiders with the Acid Cloud and high DPS and high monster power levels, so basically they can keep casting the Acid Cloud, and then once they run out of mana, they cast Medusa spiders. Or what they'll like to do is get the 4-piece Unimasa set, do MP level 1, 2, or 3, something very low with a high amount of DPS, and kill a couple enemies on a couple casts of Acid Cloud so they can retain that mana regeneration and basically just run through the act just killing everything. Acid Rain is going to be one you see a lot because it increases initial area effect of Acid Cloud by 24 yards, which is pretty huge, so you can hit multiple enemies at once, and not to mention, it's also going to leave that poison damage that does 150% weapon damage as poison over 3 seconds to enemies who remain in the area. So not only are they still going to take that additional damage from staying in the area, it also increases the area of effect of it by 24 yards, so you can actually get more enemies within inside of the Acid Cloud cast. You're going to see 90% of the Witch Doctors actually running this, probably even 95%, because it's just really nice to be able to cast your Acid Rain and capture as many enemies on the screen as you can with inside of it, and combine that with having a high DPS, so you can just mow through the enemies no problem. My favorite one personally is the Blob Bomb. The acid cloud forms into a slime that irradiates nearby enemies for 250% weapon damage over 5 seconds. Just like Phantasm, the blobs, you can actually have 3 of them out. And on your 4th cast, one of them disappears. And any enemy within this area takes 250% weapon damage over 5 seconds. So if you have 3 of them stacked together, they're going to take 750% weapon damage. So not only if you basically stack them up and cast them all on one target, they're going to take all the acid cloud damage, and anybody who's around the blobs are going to take the additional damage. And the cool thing about blobs actually seek out the target. They just don't sit there. So that's something to consider. It's more better on Ubers, bosses, and certain elites. But in general, you want to usually run the acid cloud with the acid rain because it hits more targets at one time. Slow burn, another one that's pretty decent. It really kind of helps when an enemy happens to tendency to be in one spot for a very long time, but is it the greatest? Really not necessarily. I mean, the damage ticks fairly decently, but it's nothing to be really too, joyous about. Kiss of Death, I really don't use Kiss of Death, and I don't even really use Corpse Bomb. I just found in my playstyle, my experience, that they're just really kind of lackluster. Kiss of Death pretty much just makes it like an overglorified, Locust Swarm. And with the Corpse Bomb, I mean, there's other options for in case you want to explode stuff up and blow up a lot of stuff. I mean, you can just go bear build, or you can go zombie dog with sacrifice build. So I wouldn't recommend it. The big ones you're going to be using is Acid Cloud, and then a small percentage will actually use Blob Bomb. But yeah, so just go with the Acid Rain. Gives you that extra yardage, so you can basically hit more targets with your each cast of Acid Cloud. And then also, if you are going Acid Cloud, I would advise to basically go a good critical percent chance and critical damage. And then also, you probably want to get a Scorn, because the Scorn has a nice bleed effect that transfers over to the Acid Cloud, which gives you a lot of DPS. So that's just something to get you in the mood for thinking about if you actually want to go an Acid Cloud build. Alright. Last one for the Decay tree. Unfortunately, wall zombies. It really doesn't get used a lot. I'm going to be honest. Pretty much all the skills suck for wall zombies. They try to buff up Pylon a little bit by making it so it does, 550% weapon damage physical, and it knocks him back, reduces cooldown by 10 seconds. It's really not that great, because, I mean, even with the reductions, and I got an offhand reduces by a couple seconds, it's just really not that worth it to put the person through that, how do I say, it's just not worth it to use that ability, because you're going to knock the elites back, you're going to knock back a lot of monsters, and you still have to wait a little bit of time before you recast, and if you don't cast in the right area, it's really going to be very lackluster. So, the same thing with Dead Rush. Zombies crawl the ground, does 4 and 45% weapon damage physical to nearby enemies. That's really not that great too, because if you wanted to AoE spell damage and spell, that does a lot of damage. There's other options out there. So, like I said, was Wall of Zombie. If you do take Wall of Zombie, you're going to end up taking Barricade, or you're going to take Unrelenting Grip. Barricade increases the width of Wall of Zombies, which makes it impossible for elites or bosses to pass through it. I mean, the big thing is, well, I'm not too sure about bosses, but I know elites. The only way you can get by it is by teleporting. Unlimited Grip. Your Wall of Zombie slows the movement enemies by 6% for 5 seconds. That's actually fairly decent, not the greatest thing, but the slow effect is pretty noticeable. And it's pretty much doable for the 20-second cooldown. And also, you might be in Ubers where you're retreating away from a bad mob, and then a Witch Doctor can cast it, and none of the mobs can actually run past it, which is pretty cool. Unless the mob is in lead or something like that and has teleport. Like I said, that's pretty much it for the Wall of Zombies. If you're taking Wall of Zombies, I'd recommend Barricade or Unrelenting Grip. Alright. And finally, we're in the last tree. We got Gargantuan, Big Bad Voodoo, and Fetish Army. This guy is my favorite guy. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Gargantuan. Summon Gargantuan zombie to fight for you. The Gargantuan does 100% of your weapon damage as physical. What does this mean? Whatever this number is, right here under damage, is that's going to reflect his damage that your Gargantuan is going to do for you. And there's a couple cool little tricks that you can do with him. You can actually put a Gargantuan inside of a Big Bad Voodoo, and he'll actually gain the attack speed and the movement speed from it. So, I mean, that's something to always remember in case you want to double dip, because you will receive buffs from the Big Bad Voodoo. And then that Gargantuan scales off that damage. And then he gets his own additional stats because he's standing inside the Big Bad Voodoo too. It actually works pretty well. But anyways, pretty much they developed Gargantuan very well. He has a lot of very solid skills. There was only a couple ones that I would say, okay, this is not that great. But a lot of people use a lot of actually different varieties for their Gargantuan. First one's Humongoid. You know, Gargantuan gains cleave ability, does hits attacks, hit multiple targets for 130% weapon damage. It's okay. It's not the greatest, but you know what? It is consistent DPS, and any enemies that bunch up will take additional damage from your Gargantuan. So once you start getting your Gargantuan up and leveled and you start getting that gear, then I would advise to go ahead and start using it. Or you hit that skill rune level where you can actually start using the rune, then go right ahead, because you know what? It's decent for what it is when you're first initially leveling. Alright, this is my number one go-to one, Restless Giant. When Gargantua encounters an elite enemy, up to 5 enemies, it enrages for 15 seconds. And after that 15 seconds, yes, you can recast him. He'll go immediately right back into the Restless Giant as long as he's around 5 enemies, or he's around an elite. He gets 20% movement speed. We don't care about that. His 35% attack speed increase is really nice, along with this 200% physical damage increase, which is basically brings him up to a 300% physical damage increase. And he has more attack speed. So like I said, when you combine that with Big Bad Voodoo, you get a nice little synergy of you getting your buffs and damage off that, and then also you're the pet benefiting from you. Because your DPS, your HP, your armor, and your resistance is basically reflecting to your Gargantuan. Gargantuan can crit. He does also do regular like white melee hits, but he can't crit. Now his crit rate is not affected by your crit rate. He has his own little table of how he does things. Wrathful Protector, basically what happens when he actually enrages and turns into that Restful Giant, and it only lasts 15 seconds, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people actually used to use this back in the day when they were first doing, butcher kill times, like who's the fastest. They used to run in with zombie bears and Big Bad Voodoo and drop all this DPS down and basically kill the butcher really fast. Just because they were able to have that Wrathful Protector there for 15 seconds inside that Big Bad Voodoo would Gland Slam and he would just die instantly. And that was pretty much not much he could do. Alright. Next one is Big Stinker. This is really good on higher MP levels, I think, because it's a good constant source of 15% weapon damage as poison per second to nearby enemies, and it also combos really well with the passive Bad Medicine. Very nice skill. Whenever you deal poison damage to an enemy, their damage is reduced by 20%. So basically, the enemy is always going to be reduced by 20% as long as you have your Gargantuan there, which your Big Stinker. And then damage does add up. 50% weapon damage as per second as poison, so it's poison property, just not physical, so armor won't affect that, and any enemies next to him are just going to automatically take that damage. Alright. Last one's Bruiser. I really don't see too much the point of this one. I mean, it's a pretty decent one. Slams the grounding, 200% weapon damage. It's physical. I've seen it crit for immense amounts of damage, and it has a chance to stun the enemy for 3 seconds. You really don't need stun for the PvE enemies when you get up higher level, and you really don't want to have Gargantuan in PvP, because a lot of classes will just simply attack it and get their life back because they got a lot of life steal and life on hit abilities. So if you like it, then use it, but I have to recommend Restless Giant or Humongoid or Big Stinker, and those are probably going to be the best ones you're going to get situated with. Alright, Big Bad Voodoo. What does this do? Conjure Fetish begins a ritual dance that increases attack speed and movement speed by all nearby enemies by 20%. For 20 seconds. First one, Jungle Drums. Increase the duration of the ritual for 30 seconds, which is actually semi-decent, especially when you're leveling, and it helps when you're in group parties. Ups everybody's DPS so you can get the job done a lot faster. Rain Dance. A ritual stores 122 mana per second while standing in the ritual area. Now, if you need a way to get back mana, this might possibly be the way. Like I said again, back when witch doctors used to pride themselves on killing the butcher over and over again, a lot of witch doctors would actually put that on their Big Bad Voodoo just so they had enough mana so they can go ahead and push to limit and make sure that they have enough mana to cast your spells and abilities. And I kind of pause right there because it's like, there's really no reason why you really need to ever take Rain Dance anymore because there's too many ways for a Witch Doctor to get back their mana. So I would say just skip over this one. Now, the big one is Ghost Trench is one that heals you. This is a good one to take if you want to be more supportive in your group roles. The healing does help. The Boogeyman is okay. If they die inside the ritual, they have a chance to do the zombie dog, but I really don't recommend it. The number one I would recommend is Slam Dance because it increases the damage of all nearby allies by 30%. So in group play, Uber play, or anything, even solo, this skill pretty much reigns supreme. It gets a lot better when you're in group light settings because, like I said, when you get that spell off, it increases everybody's DPS by 30%, and if you have high DPS already, it's just going to increase your DPS numbers just by a ridiculous amount. And, you know, sometimes that's what a good thing is to do as a Witch Doctor, is just to bring that skill into a fight, whether it be Ubers or however you're doing it or whatever you're running, and run it with them because, you know, that DPS increased is more than enough reason to bring in a Witch Doctor to a party just from that skill alone. Has 120-second cooldown. You got skills that can reduce the time, but I would say not to worry too much about that. And just in general, I mean, it is probably one of the best skills for Witch Doctor in-game. And I know people are like, oh, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean, if you're in a group party and you cast it, I mean, the DPS is immense. So if you're not using it already, then I would highly recommend you guys start getting into that. Alright, so last one, Fetish Army. Fetish Army, some people use this, some people don't. A lot of people don't use it anymore. Some people still do. It's a lot of bursty DPS from these guys. Summon Army of Dagger wielding fetishes to fight by yourself for 20 seconds. The fetishes attack 20% of your weapon damage is physical. It's okay. The big thing is for the Fetish Army, what everybody's pretty much going to do. They're not going to use Headhunter, summon additional 2 Hunter fetishes that shoot blow darts to enemies. They're not going to use Sticky Torches or Legends of the Dagger. The only ones we're going to use possibly is Divided Falling, which decreases the cooldown of Fetish Army to 68 seconds. Or they're going to be using Fetish Ambush. This one is actually probably the best one to use because it does 250% weapon damage as physical to any and bright enemies as a summon. So basically what that means, basically you're going to take 1,000 damage if you're next to me. So if I cast that and the enemy elite or the other player in PvP is directly on top of me, all little fetishes come out. They do their 250% weapon damage as they come out, and then you still have to deal with the fact, or the enemy's going to have to deal with the fact that once you do that, the fetishes are going to go ahead and start doing their regular DPS of 20% of their weapon damage. So PvP and PvE, this is really good. PvP, you just got to save it for when they get CC'd and you'll walk up to them and drop it on top of somebody and they'll take a lot of damage. And in PvE, you predominantly want to use it for when you're going against elites or things of that nature. Outside of that, you're really not going to use it much. A lot of players kind of rotated out Fetish Army once they discovered Acid Cloud and zombie bears. So, I mean, some people still out there use it. I use it occasionally. It's a very good skill. Good versus elite, good versus players. So definitely something not to skimp out on, but definitely the best rune out of the Fetish Army tree here. So, anywho. As always, this is the conclusion of the Witch Doctor skill guides. If you guys haven't seen part 1 or part 2, make sure you guys check that out. Basically, we just covered all the skills. We went over the primary, secondary in the first... No, I'm sorry. We went over primary in the first video. We went over secondary and defensive in the second one. And in this third video, we went over the Terror, the Decay, and Voodoo. The reason why I made the skills or set of skill guides is to give you a basic idea and relevance to what Witch Doctors are running today, and just a general idea what runes are good to take and which ones you should not even bother with. So hopefully this series actually helped you guys learn a little bit more about the Witch Doctor and inspire you to keep playing it. It's one of the wonderful classes. And make sure you guys are looking out for my next video, which will be basically covering all the passives of the Witch Doctor and how people are comboing them together with their skills. So as always, I'm hopefully your favorite Witch Doctor, Debo. If you guys like what I do and you guys want to check me out live streaming, check me over there on Twitch TV, twitch.tv/SPSDebo. Also in the art at the end of the video, you'll see it there. And also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. As always, if you guys have any questions or comments, leave them down in that little comment section below and like this up and spread it to your friends. And let's go ahead and encourage more people to, you know, roll their... or at least put away their barb or their wizard or their monk or their DH and try a Witch Doctor. So anyways, thank you guys, and I'm Debo, and I'll check you guys later.
Don't bring me down. Don't tell me our youth is running out. It's only just begun.